All right, welcome to Life in the Law. Again, I'm your host, Ken Lawson, and we have a very special show for you today. Actually, it's my last show, so I'm going to miss my Cracker Jack staff here. But I'm teaching a lot of courses at the law school this semester, so I just don't have the time, even though I had the desire to do the show. But I will come back in the summer, Zuri, and do a couple of shows if Jay will let me. But anyway, our guest today is law student Diana Kim, and I met Diana. Welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you.
And we're just going to talk about life in general, your life
All
specifically, and some of the other things that we talked about homelessness on our show before, but I know that you're directly related to it. But I met you when you were taking my criminal law class a couple of years ago. And as you know, I shared my story with all the students, and then you came by to my office and you shared a very, very moving story with me. And I've seen you over the last couple of years do some phenomenal things at the law school. And to go to D.C. and work on Capitol Hill. And it's just been amazing. And so I thought that for my last show, I'd bring an amazing person on the show that will give, not just talk about your experience, but I think, you know, when we talk, everybody has a journey. Everybody has a story. And when people are willing to bare their souls, there's something about the human spirit that when I tell you my most vulnerable things about me, it brings us closer together. It gives us hope. And so when you shared your story with me, you know, it was just very heartfelt and very moving and very inspiring. So welcome.
Thank you. Man, it's 1 minute into this show, you're already getting my eyes to tear up. This is not a good sign.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. You were born here?
Yeah, no, actually I was born in California, but I moved here when I was really little, like 6 years old. I lived on this island for up until I was about 10, and then I grew up, you know, the remaining years on Maui. I went to about like 5 different elementary schools, so a lot of my roots are kind of scattered on this island. Graduated from Maui High.
Why were you moving around so much?
A lot of it was just my family. My family circumstances was really difficult. You know, my parents divorced. They're kind of on and off again a few times, and there were periods where basically, you know, we were homeless. My mom didn't have a really stable job, so we would, you know, live with her friends, my aunties, people. They weren't really related, but we would live with them. So there was a lot of moving around. At one point, you know, I remember this little car that we had. It was called Pinky. She bought it for, I think, like $800.
Hey, what color was it?
It was orange, but we called it Pinky. I called it Pinky, yeah. So we lived out of a car for a little while, and then we eventually found a spot at her friend's house, rented out rooms.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so you finished high school in Maui?
Yep, moved to Maui. She remarried, and I'd say high school was probably harder. It was, you know, just during that adolescent period, you know, you're trying to figure out who you are, what you want in life, and there was a lot of, you know, just family challenges again. So I left home about when I was 16, ran away, said, you know, if I want a better life, I need to know what it's like to be out of the dysfunction.
So did you have any siblings at home, or?
Yeah, I had some stepbrothers, and we're all doing great now, you know.
Okay.
I mean, it's in the past, but a lot of the
You decided to leave when you were 16?
Yeah, yeah.
How'd you make it?
I made it, I'm here.
Well, how?
How did I make it?
Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you, it's a really personal story, but this is going to sound kind of funny.
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, is it okay to talk about, can we talk story and get personal, or do you want to?
Yeah,
I'll leave it up to you.
It's fine. I mean,
I bare my soul on this show, right?
I know. I can share it.
You don't have to.
Well, I can share part of it.
Okay.
It was, you know, I had some really good friends that helped me out, that let me stay in their, you know, in their homes, and friends who really lent out a hand. And there were a couple nights that I spent at the park, and there was this really cool tree house thing that someone had built there. So I stayed there for a little while. I was kind of, you know, imagining that I was what's that book, My Side of the Mountain?
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine I was, you know, that character, like just living in the forest, and I made it work. A lot of people in high school, I don't think they really knew what was going on at that time. It's hard to talk to people about it.
Well, I mean, certain things you just don't tell other people, especially, you know, when I was coming up, you know, the rule was whatever goes on in this house stays in this house. You
Oh,
were
yeah.
not allowed to talk about anything, any family matters
Definitely.
outside the house. And
Definitely.
so you just knew. So there was this, you know, the family wanted to portray this image of everything is fine in our house, even though
Yeah.
going home it was a
Yeah,
mess.
that part was very real in my life at that time. You know, that, because I mean, you know, the Asian culture too, you don't really want to let it all hang out. But you know, the thing is I found that the more comfortable I get with sharing my story, the more other people say, you know, this is something I'm going through right now too. A lot of my students, you know, when I had the chance to teach lecture courses in family resources, I can't count the number of students that came up to me and said, you know, your story has shined so much light on my past. And it's nice to know that other people have gone through it and they can get out of it, you know. And that's the thing is, don't be ashamed of it. I still struggle with that.
It's hard. Yeah, I mean, it's hard because, you know, but I think too, when we get down to it, what we're ultimately here on earth to do is to help one another. And how can I be of help to you if I won't share with you some of the things that I've been through? Right. And I think when we share our stories, we find out that we have more in common with each other than we thought. And then people start asking you for help. Right. Or you inspire, as you've done throughout the law school. So you graduated from high school, and then what happened?
Graduated from high school, came to UH. You know, I had these, I was actually going to enlist in the Air Force or the Army, the military. I didn't really have a lot of options, but a close family friend of mine said, you know, you should really consider just applying to UH. You can, it's right in your own backyard. You know, there are ways to get there. And I worked. I was able to get here with one of my best friends, who's now my husband, and we both worked really hard. I was able to pay my tuition and payment plans, applied for scholarships, and I've been still in school. You know, I got my master's degree and now law school. It seems like it's a theme in my life to continue.
Well, along the way, you've had a couple little...
Yeah, a lot of experiences.
And little kids,
I'm trying to brush it apart. Yeah, I had kids. I had my first when I was 21, my second when I was 23. The ongoing joke and the way I introduced myself in law school was that I seem to have had a baby for each degree I've earned. So if I start getting really big, it's not like the freshman 15. It's because I know. But yeah, the kids, you know, the kids really changed my life. I'd say, and going back to, you know, high school, you asked me that question about it being a little personal, but I found the courage to leave when I had one incident occur.
When you say leave, to leave home?
Leave home, yeah. Well, it wasn't really home because at the time I was living with my mom at her workplace. But I had the courage to leave when I realized that there was no way that I was ever going to have, you know, the opportunity to have the family that I want unless I remove myself from, you know, the negative cycle. And it's like you can see that some people in life are just struggling to get out of that cycle. It's not my kuleana to like try to fix my parents. I can't, not right now. And so at the age of 16, I said, okay, I wrote in my journal and I said, I'm leaving for you, my children who I don't have yet, who I want to give, you know, the life that I would like to have for myself. And it's amazing because, you know, having the kids so young, it was like, okay, this is my opportunity. I'm meant to have these babies, and they're meant to highlight my life in a way where I can help people. And so I had my kids, I would take them, you know, to class while I'm teaching. You know, they remember when I would do lectures, and there was like a segment on, was it like labor and delivery and maternal child health, and I'd be bouncing the baby around in a class of 120 students. So it's very real. A lot of, you know, the educational goals I've had in my life also pair really well with what's been going on in my life at the time.
Okay.
But the kids they're crucial. I think that's really where it's at. You know, you gotta, when you have your children, that's your opportunity to fix certain things.
So you went to UH, and what did you major in?
I got an undergrad degree in psychology, a minor in FAMR, family resources.
Okay, and then you mentioned a couple of times about teaching. Mm-hmm. And so you were teaching at UH. Yeah, and I still am technically. It's online lecture courses, but. Hey, how you like doing that online?
It's
this
great.
Is a little side thing, yeah.
I thought we were talking about homelessness.
Yeah, we will in a minute.
Yeah.
Because you have a personal story about that also, but.
Right.
Yeah, the online stuff. Do you enjoy that?
I do enjoy it. I miss teaching face to face.
Why?
Because that's when you really connect with people.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, behind a computer, it's like, what am I going to be able to? I can't impart anything. They don't know who I am. You know, I can't really bring the theories to
So you
life.
guys don't see each other when you're doing online?
Not as often, unless they want to meet with me.
I mean, so it's not like an online, like Skype class, right, where they get to see you and you see them?
No, but sometimes I do Skype with them.
Cool.
Yeah, and I try to have like a nice blank wall.
All right.
All right.
Now let's get back to it.
Okay.
So you're teaching.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about your dad. I don't know how to get into this
all right.
topic.
No. Okay, here, I think I can help you. So,
yeah, help me.
Homelessness has been a theme in my life as well. You know, my experiences of being homeless, kind of transitionally homeless too, right? There are different types and categories of homeless. And that experience at an early age, I think, just not having a sense of place and home made me more aware of it as far as the people who were on the streets. And so I have memories, my earliest memories of homelessness in Waikiki, where my mom and I would be walking down the street, and I'd always want to give money to them or something and just talk to them, and she would always yank my arm away. Because, you know, what kind of mom would want their child, their little daughter, talking to strangers? But I would always go back. I always felt compelled to just talk to them. And as life went on, and in college, one of my first stories photographically, I have a background in photography and photojournalism, was on homelessness. It was the first piece that was published in the Kaleo. And that experience really gave me an idea of the social issues surrounding homelessness, and probably was like the primer for the legal issues that now I see in law school. And so that kind of sparked it. Photography sparked my motivation to understand more of, you know, what are the social injustices in life? How do we address it now legally or, you know, legislatively, right? But so I spent a lot of time, you know, doing art workshops at the homeless shelter with my family. I'd bring my kids. I developed more stories, and I shared with you that clip. I don't know if we're going to be able to air it, but
when we come back from our break,
okay.
We'll air it on the other side of the break,
Right.
because I found that a very beautiful piece.
Yeah.
I know you do a lot of photography too,
Yeah.
and it's just been stunning. And before we leave the show today, you can leave your website, and because it's just beautiful art.
Thank you.
It really is. But you still haven't segued into your father,
I know,
right?
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
so ultimately,
Well,
I have this
take your time
background.
to get there, then.
No, I have a background, you know, and it kind of builds up to it, because, you know, you make these decisions in life, not always knowing, like, well, why am I doing this? Why am I so interested in homelessness? You know, it's just, people would ask me all the time, like, why that population?
Yeah.
And more recently, I'd say about 2 years ago, you know, I didn't have a relationship growing up with my father. It was just, you know, after my parents' divorce, I was raised by my mom. I got to UH, and he lives here. And so I kind of got to know him a little bit. But then I found out 2 years ago that he was on the verge of becoming homeless. And that's when, you know, after all these years of time and just that gravitation towards this population, for it to happen to my dad. And it was right before I went up to DC. So that Patsy Mink Fellowship, you know, in some way it was so bittersweet, because one, it was an opportunity to learn more of how, you know, our country works.
When you talk about the Patsy Mink Fellowship, tell the viewers what you're referring to. So
the Patsy Mink Fellowship is, it's a legislative fellowship where you get placed with one of our congressional offices.
Yeah, but it's not just a fellowship. I mean, it's a highly sought after fellowship.
It is, yeah.
You had to interview and go through a big, long process.
I did.
And only one person gets selected.
Every year.
Right. And you were selected for the year
2013.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, there were times when getting up to that point, I wasn't even sure if law school was really the right fit for me. And you know that personally, because I just kept telling you, I'd rather be out there. You know, that project that I was working on with the homeless before I started law school, I just wanted to go back. But that fellowship, it projected me into a different direction, and I went. But before I went, I left, you know, and I left my family, my kids and my husband too, to do this. And it was a big deal, because I do not like to spend time away from them.
Your husband has been extremely, you know,
supportive.
Like you said, your best friend,
Yes,
and very supportive. We're going to come back after this break and find out about Dad and you, and you know, continue with your journey. But we'll start back with D.C. a little bit, because I thought that was pretty interesting.
Okay.
You going to D.C. and the family support that your husband and kids gave while you were there, they were here, etc.
All right.
All right, we'll be right back after this break.
Aloha, I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week, we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to ThinkTech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
All right, welcome back to Life and the Law. I'm your host, Kenneth Lawson, and we're picking back up where we left off right before the break with Diana Kim, and you were taking us to D.C. Now you're going to the Capitol, right?
Amazing experience.
It had to be. It had to be.
A little scary, yeah.
And going back to the Patsy Mink Fellowship,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you work with, which congressperson did you work with?
Hanabusa.
Okay.
Representative Hanabusa, yep.
And so, what kind of experience was that?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I've never, I
Yeah,
haven't
no,
been
it
to
was
the
a great
Capitol,
experience.
so,
I mean,
yeah.
it was that feeling of, wow, this
Did
is
you get
where
to
it
see
all
a
started.
lot of the
I did.
same people that we see on CNN and stuff like that?
Yeah, I did. A lot of Republicans, so it was interesting too, just because you don't see a whole lot of them around here.
Yeah.
But it was a good experience, but it was bittersweet, like I said, because I right around when I was getting ready to leave, I found out that my dad was on the streets. And so the final week, one of the last couple of days before I left, I was trying to get my dad some help. And I'd been outreaching with, different organizations and departments here. And it was hard because I just didn't really know what his backstory was either. So having, it was
What do you
really
mean by backstory? What do you mean?
Well, what he was suffering with, what he was battling. And at the time, I didn't know fully that it was a mental illness, that it was a severe mental illness, that it was ongoing. And yeah, I didn't understand how comprehensive of an issue it was. I just saw him on the streets. And a lot of it, the thing is, what's ironic is that he had a home, but because of his illness and stopping treatment, that's what led to him, his hygiene became really bad and people started to complain. The residents were concerned and the building manager and the landlord just didn't renew. And they, so it was hard. And at the time, my grandmother, his mom, was going through chemo. She had cancer and she passed away. And that was really hard.
Yeah.
It was really, really hard. I mean, there were certain points where it was just like, why does this have to happen right now? When I'm about to leave, I can't do anything. Couldn't do anything.
And so you left, and obviously you were concerned about your father. There's really nothing you could do for him at the time. As you mentioned, you and I spoke several times before you left to go to D.C. What happened when you got back?
When I got back, it's always hard thinking about that day. I've written about that in a blog post on my website, but when I got back, he was worse than I'd seen him. He lost a lot of weight. He was standing at a corner of a street, kind of in Koreatown. I like to call it Koreatown because that's where all the businesses are. But he was standing in the corner of a street, and I walked up to him, and he didn't even recognize me. So, yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy to go up to somebody that you love, and for them to look at you and not recognize you. And so I kept asking him. I said, do you want to get some help? Do you want to get some help? And I've seen him so many times on the streets at night, and that was something that really concerned a lot of my friends and family, that I would go to him at night.
You would actually go out and look?
Oh, yeah. After class, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would go, even after, some of our classes, I would just go straight over there knowing that at least I knew where he would sleep. I didn't always know where he was during the day, and I had work and everything, but I knew that if I got him at night, at least that way I could give him food, and I could ask him if he would like to get some help the next day or something, you know.
So,
and he just got worse and worse and worse.
when you say worse and worse, what do you mean?
I mean, his physically, his body, like he was deteriorating. It's like watching, you know, some of the photographs that I have of him before he had a heart attack. He looked like, you know, those prisoners of war kind of photographs. I mean, these images of people who have been out there for many years. Yeah, it was really bad.
And so what's happened since then?
Since then, a lot's happened. I mean, so that I went on radio and I went on HPR with Beth Ann Kozlovich, and that morning I saw my dad. That was one of the last times I had seen him before he landed in the hospital. About a week later, I found out that he had a heart attack and that he was at one of the hospitals, and he was in critical care. And the whole time,
how did you find this information out? Did you go back down to the park or wherever he was at, and then people tell you, you know?
No, I mean, well, one of my cousins got a call, and he received the bill or something. You know, it was just a notice of some kind, and so he said, he gave me a call and said, "Hey, did you know that your dad's in the ER?" I'm like, "No, I didn't know anything. I've been looking for him," and so that's kind of what spurred, you know, this whole bracelet thing, part of the Kickstarter campaign to you know, spread awareness on how important it is for proper documentation. You know, people are out there, they don't always have their belongings with them. They oftentimes lose their IDs, their important medical documentation.
Yeah.
So,
or they have it taken from them.
Right, it gets stolen. Yep.
Or sometimes when the police come and they start
doing the sweeps.
Doing a sweep, everything that's taken is just thrown away.
That's really, yeah.
Right? And then those are people's, it'd be like somebody coming and taking everything out of your house and just driving off with it.
It's very counterintuitive. I mean, I you know, met a lot of other people on the streets too. I still go back, even though my dad's not there, I still go back. And a lot of the folks that I've spoken with, you know, there was one guy where I was talking to him, and of course somebody said, "Well, you can't have your belongings here, you need to move it." And so I helped him push the cart, and we moved it. I said, "Where are we going?" He goes, "We're gonna go 15 feet down there, so it doesn't bother him." I said, "Okay, I mean, if that's what you want to do." So we pushed it across, and then I asked him, I was like, "What do you do with all this stuff all day?" And he goes, "Well, I watch it, and then my son, who's in high school, when he gets out of school, he comes over and he watches it, and then I go out and try to get us some food and try to find some, you know, money or do little jobs." And I'm thinking, okay, so you have a son who's in school, and
both of them are homeless.
Both of them are homeless, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So let's see if we can watch this clip real quick. And this is a clip. Can you describe it for us?
Yeah. So this clip is basically the project that I worked on before I started law school. This is what drove me to want to go back to them.
All right. Let's see if we can tee that up.
I would pass one rule or one law, and I'd say if you don't live here, you can't own property here. I think that's the biggest reason why our rental markets are fairly high, is because people will pay, rich people will pay the price as an investment income.
Yeah.
And they drive up the market, and people like us who have to live off service labor jobs, which is basically $10 an hour and under, are stuck with these high rental prices we can't possibly afford.
I can.
Yeah, I know. I one time I got paid $1,200 a month, and my rent was $1,100. So surviving is not the problem, because we survive every day. It's pretty easy. It's thriving that we need to do. We need to stop staying stagnant, being stagnant, because basically I can stay here all day long.
You can. You rarely see me lying down.
And I'll never go hungry. I'll never go thirsty. I'll always be entertained because I have a book. And that's okay. But I'll never get ahead. I'll always be here. Check with me in 10 years, and I'll still be here.
Laying down.
Yeah. That's surviving. I don't want to survive. We need to thrive. We need to get out of where we are, if that's what we want. There's other of us who are perfectly happy staying here for the rest of our lives.
Sad.
Which is sad. I do. I don't want to die here. I'd like to get another house and find the last love of my life, share my life with somebody who also has my passions, and for whatever brief moments we can have, That's what I want. I don't want to die here.
Wow, that's just awesome. It's awesome. Your artwork is so beautiful, but the people, it brings life to people that actually are invisible to a lot of the culture. You know what I mean? It's like we don't see them, even though they're right there in front of us, because we don't want to see them. When I say them, I mean people, homeless. We walk over them in Waikiki. We ignore them in the parks, and your work brings it to life and makes people understand, at least me, that it's real.
I think a lot of people in our community are doing that too, and it's not just me. I mean, I think the only reason why I force myself to do these things and come out and share the story is really because that the fact that it happened to my dad, to me, that it can hit so close to home, and you really just don't know. It can happen to anybody.
Oh, yeah.
And especially, for those with severe mental illnesses that come on later, late onset mental illnesses, it can definitely devastate, the trajectory of your life if you don't have access to that proper medication.
Yeah, and at least, it's got to be so difficult to get your life back on track.
Yeah.
So if you become homeless, to be able to get a footing back into getting your life back on track has to be difficult. Because, as you know, mental health programs have been shortchanged for years, and they're treated more or less like criminals.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't agree with that.
Right.
Unfortunately, I can't say that I see any benefit in incarceration of the homeless. I mean, if you're mentally ill, you're mentally ill. You need treatment. You don't need to go to a jail and then come right back out. That doesn't help anybody.
Absolutely.
No.
But that's what we, some people do need to be at least inpatient for a while until the drugs can and the therapy can be working together, so that there's not a disconnect, or at least a less chance of a disconnect when they are released.
Right.
So take me back to your father real quick. After he has a heart attack, what happens then?
So he had a heart attack, and finally that triggered the law.
What do you mean?
Well, you have to either be a danger to yourself or to other people, right? That was unfortunately one of the issues, is that he wasn't a danger to himself. He was still, walking around, and he was still eating a little bit, and he wasn't hurting anybody. So it was hard. It was difficult for him to get any treatment in that form.
Any mental health treatment?
Any mental health treatment, right. So what had happened was, from what I gathered, bits and pieces from the rest of the family, is that once he had a heart attack, and because there were some documents, as far as back history on his condition, they were able to treat him properly at the hospital, and that treatment has worked miracles for him. He is a completely different person. And, only now I'd have to say, I didn't ever even have a conversation with him, and I didn't even realize, it's almost like I can separate my dad, who I'm getting to know now, from the illness.
Yeah.
And he explained how this had been going on since 1992. And so for me personally, to go backtracking into my life and thinking about all of the things that had happened in our past, all of the personal experiences that felt at the time so damaging, but, gave me the ability to say, I want better, I want better, I want better. It's almost like we came full circle. It's like there might have been some dysfunction in our family, and I'm not saying that it was completely his mental illness. He made choices and decisions too, everybody does, but it kind of gives me a better insight as to what was going on with him. And we have a conversation, an ongoing relationship now, and I'm trying to help him as far as, achieving some of his short-term goals.
And see, that's awesome, because I think a lot of times at least I can sum up somebody's experience by just looking at different pieces of it. I'll make a judgment about my parents without knowing exactly fully the whole story. And once I hear the whole story, it's like, okay, now I see why. I mean, as you know, I was born in a mental institution. My mother had me. And so when and then I got placed up for adoption, so I didn't find my mother till I was in my mid-20s. And when I met her, she still had some serious mental health problems. And so I never got to have a normal conversation with her. I mean, we could talk, right? And then
Right.
she was schizophrenic.
Yeah.
And we'd be in the middle of a restaurant, and she would just start yelling at the top of her lungs. And I'd be like, if I asked the wrong question, which was, you know, I want to see my sister, who's her other, you know, my half-sister. And my mother didn't like my half-sister. And so as soon as I mentioned that, man, she would just clock, you know. And I didn't know how to deal with that. And she ended up, when I went back and got her health records, I saw how she would be placed into the mental institution. Then she would escape. Then they'd catch her. Then they put her back. Then they give her these shock treatments. Then she would escape. They catch her again. And I got a chance to see the fight that was in her to be free, right? You know, just by looking at those records. And then when I finally met her, just to see what life had done to her, you know. And like you said, she made choices too. You know, she was still, you know, drinking and still using drugs, and had the mental health issue. But she had developed cancer and was so afraid of hospitals. She refused, she just died. She refused to be treated. Even though her cancer was curable, she was so afraid that if she went back to a hospital, they would keep her and subject her to that type of treatment. That she ended up dying because she didn't want to get the treatment, you know what I mean? And so, and I think that's why we became pretty close.
Right.
Because, I mean, it's a serious issue. And people, these are things that people don't talk about, you know?
Right, yeah.
The mental illness that runs through a lot of people's families, it's just not good to mention that I have a crazy aunt, you know, and stuff like, you know what I mean?
I think everybody does, though. That's the thing, is we're just so, as a society, we're so afraid to talk about it.
Yeah.
We're so afraid, and that's part of it. Is I think, you know, and I saw in your most recently about a quote that you shared or something that you shared, as far as, you know, not letting fear guide you and keep you from making the kinds of choices that you want, you know, good things in life. And that's part of it, is just, you know, at some point, whatever harm is done to us, whatever negative experiences we experience in life, it's like you have to be able to want to do better. You know, I mean, and for some people like my dad at the time, there's just no way he could have chosen to get better. And that's the thing is, and I think it's kind of obvious when you walk around. You know, the problem is there's this like struggle, right? We don't want to institutionalize them. We want to make sure that they still have their freedom. But at the same time, we need to do something more as a community, because if not, nothing good is coming from just letting them be on the streets.
And we're going to go to our last break and then come back, because now we're going to talk about you know, the treatment that's needed to change your father, right? Because it's a chemical imbalance. And once that happens, and the medication they're different people. And no one wants to be the way they are. But, you know, we have to help each other. And then talk about the bracelets and the new program that you got kicked off here to help people on this island. All right, we'll be right back after this break.
Aloha, Yappers, and a Happy New Year. I'm your host, King Zilly. From inner city out to the platform and now on the Yap Show. It's a new year, and most would say a new beginning. So this is a call to action. As we promote tech, energy, diversification, and globalism, with ThinkTech Hawaii, the Yap Show is all about advocacy for effective leadership, comprehensive youth policies, programs, and access to knowledge and information for upward social mobility, especially for the historically underprivileged youth. This means we'll be looking at young people making a difference in their community. Youth policies here in Hawaii, the country, and the world. We want to highlight youth programs that are meeting young people where they are, working together to accomplish a goal or tackle an issue, while providing information and access to free educational content for anybody looking to learn on their own time, study for an exam, or simply refresh their memory. We do this by inviting everyday people like yourself, state policymakers, youth advocacy groups, youth programs, professionals, and so forth. But most importantly, we'll be partnering up with my new organization, causeeffect.org. More information on Cause Effect, as this website is currently in development and hopes to feature courses, seminars, tutorials, and conducting surveys that will be featured on the show. As we leave behind 2014, I wish I could say we leave behind issues such as police brutality, youth violence, education, economic mobility, and so many other hot-button topics that made 2014 a difficult year. So what does it mean for the new year? What does it mean for youth policy? What does it mean for Hawaii as a whole? And most importantly, how does it affect you and your community? We want you to tune into the Yap Show at 3 p.m. Friday and find out. Aloha.
All right, we're back on Life in the Law. And yeah, before we went to break, we were talking about the new initiative that you started. And you had a bracelet on when you came in, but you've taken it off during the break so that the people can see it. Tell me about this new initiative.
Okay, well, so I started a Kickstarter campaign, and what I did was raise enough funds so that I could, one, share the photo stories and stories of other people that I've met, my personal story in a book form. But the second part of it was so that I could raise enough money to buy these bracelets. So these are medical ID bracelets that allow us to upload their information. Whoops. So it's just a USB stick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But it comes installed with software that allows me to like input their names if they have any, you know, medical conditions that maybe they'd like me to put into the bracelet. That way, if they lose any other stuff, they have something, they have a backup.
So you go down, you talk to the guys, and you input this, and you put the stuff on there, and then give them the bracelet.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much, awesome. Yeah. And that's it. You know, the idea really came about when I was trying to get my dad assistance, and everybody would say, "Well, we need his proper forms of ID." And I'm going, I don't have his identification, but I know who he is, you know. And so it was just this constant struggle trying to, one, figure out where his document was, but also making sure that we still had it. And he, you know, he would lose things all the time. I would give him new shoes and he wouldn't be wearing it. So it was just.
Is that waterproof too?
Yep, it's waterproof. So this is called a Care Medical bracelet. And I was able to contact the CEO in Texas. I gave him a call and it's like, hey, I'm Diana. I just wanted to know if you'd be willing to give me a discounted price for these things.
Really?
He's been really supportive.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been cool.
That's awesome. And how many have you distributed so far or been able?
I'm still waiting for the shipment to come in. So the Kickstarter just ended recently. So now I have the funds and I'm trying to, you know, place an order for the right size. They were out of the size that I needed.
And what else are you working on with respect to the homeless?
Oh, well, photographically, you know, I have, I was given some equipment from the Impossible Project. I don't know if you about Polaroid cameras from the 70s. So what they're doing is trying to revive analog, you know, film. My dad was a photographer, so that's the other interesting part is I gave my dad one of the cameras that I had been using that whole time when I was documenting, you know, his experience. And I think that's what allowed me to keep going back. It's because at first I was just scared to see him. I couldn't look at him. And so I would take these pictures as a way to remember what it was that I was feeling and thinking at the time. I'd go home and I would write a lot. And so I have all of these journals and all of these thoughts and really raw emotional feelings that are captured right there, and I'd like to share them in the book so that people can see, you know, what it's like. But also, I mean, you never know, there might be other people out there who could benefit from it. And if all it comes to is just someone sending me an email and saying thank you, and for me to acknowledge them as a person, that it's going to be okay, that we can figure out, you know, solutions.
I think I read, I don't know if it was in Civil Beat, it may have been in Civil Beat, but I read a story, and I think I sent it to you. Remember about the lady who was found?
She passed away.
Yeah, passed away on the beach in Waikiki.
Right.
Was homeless, and it was just such a sad story because it, you know, in the midst of all the people vacationing and enjoying Waikiki, to walk over somebody, you know,
well, that's
and not see the devastation, right? Like I said, you know, just people being invisible to it's just hurtful.
It is hurtful. And I know that there are other families that are going through it that are probably afraid to come out and, you know, talk about it, because it's a lot more common than you think, just like everything else. And whether it's because of substance abuse, or if they're veterans, or they're seriously mentally ill, or if they're, you know, doing it by choice. I've met people all across the spectrum. And that's the thing, is there isn't really, I don't think there is one blanket policy that's going to fix this. It's really, it's a two-way street, or maybe even four ways, depending on how you look at it. But it starts also with the individual, right? And for some people, if they don't want to change, they're not going to. But for those who are mentally ill, like my dad was, they need assistance in a different way because they can't make that decision. They're not mentally, they just don't have any mental clarity. How can you expect a person who is battling schizophrenia and is hallucinating to be able to say, gee, I need help. I'm just gonna go ahead, and this person's asking me for help, I'm gonna say yes, and then actually follow through. I can't count how many times where I've approached my dad, had my phone, was ready to say, okay, you know, call the right people and say, okay guys, he's willing to get help. He's gonna, you know, validate this over the phone, and he's still going to think the same thing when you get here. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
He would change his mind.
Yeah.
So really, I mean, that heart attack was a blessing in disguise, but I don't think that it should have to come to that. I don't think it should be, to the point where this person's going to die before they get any help. There's something wrong with that. And at the end of it, it's going to cost us all more money. At the hospital bill, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I really believe in assisted community treatment. I think there was a bill that was recently passed, and I'm trying to do some pro bono work for the attorneys and, the group the task force that has been trying to push this along. Met a lot of really cool people in the community who are very aware of the issue and are wanting to participate in a way to make this better for everybody.
It was I don't know if you saw the paper this morning, and today is, what's the day, the 14th? Today's the 14th, right?
It's the first week of school. I don't know.
I'm saying it in case somebody watches this and it's a rerun. But it's the 14th of January. And in the Star Advertiser this morning, it talked about some of the success that this new program was having, where people were relocated and had gotten their own housing, that were homeless. And then it talked about, like, Hilton Hawaiian Village putting on a fundraiser to raise more money for shelters and stuff like that.
That makes a lot of sense. That'll help our tourism economy.
Yeah.
So I think it's happening. We're well on our way, but at the individual level, I saw a need, again, as far as the documents go. And I appreciate the fact that people have been reaching out, and that I'm really glad to see that there's public-private partnerships that are happening. And
I think at the individual level, though, that individual level that you're at brings life to the issue, right? It's one thing to me to sit down and look at statistics, read about homelessness, and then see a human life that's affected, right?
And a lot
then
of people
start caring.
Then you start caring. Well, a lot of people don't expect it too when they see me. I don't think they don't realize. But that's the thing, is we can change if we want to. We can make it better if we want to. And that's what I hope that, kids who are at home and maybe feeling really stuck, that there is hope. And whatever repetitive pattern that you've experienced in your life because of your parents, you can change that for yourself. Try not, I don't allow myself to be the victim, and I hope that people can try to see a way out and work for it, and hopefully there are the right resources on the other end, give a helping hand as far as, what's the saying? Instead of a hand out, it's a hand up, right? Yeah. Hand up, yeah.
That's a good enough saying. I mean, and that's a good way to end the show. I think that every person has to at least make a decision in their life that bad things happen to all of us, right? Most people don't want to share that, but that still doesn't stop us from achieving our goals and being who God made us, who sent us here to be, right? Being the people that we're sent here to be. And that's part of the journey, isn't it?
That's right. I don't know what's going to happen. Who knows?
You're not supposed to know. All right, that's our show for today. Again, thank you, my favorite law student, Diana Kim. And we will see you when we see you. Thanks.
Thank you. That was good.
Yes.
Was it?
Yes.